You can stay and ask questions also, Jeff.
Oh, no, I'm right here. That's all right. I just don't want to walk in the middle.
Okay. Well, the door's locked, so no one can walk in.
Oh, great.
So I would start off by introducing yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
And, you know, I'm here tonight to make this contribution.
Okay. David had asked, what was my father's influence on me, which was vast, but I'll try to keep it to,
right.
Where we are here. Why I'm donating the valise here.
Right.
What the valise
And
means.
also you'll tell something about what happened to your father during the war that this valise traveled through?
Sure.
I'm wondering if those one time. So, and I already told Helen that we'll work out the issue if it ever needs to be returned. We'll all that, but she already knows it's not a permanent, perhaps not a permanent contribution.
But, you know what?
Just didn't want you to not think we already.
It's.
covered
I mean, it's just for my son,
Right, which is
or the
fine.
people that loved my father, if they ever build a museum or something.
Right. Okay, so I think the tape is running. So
Oh,
we're
really?
going to start.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So sure. So as you know, you want me to talk to that or talk to you?
Talk to me.
I'm going to talk to you. So Helen, I'm Jake Ehrenreich, and I'm very happy to be here because I'm going to donate this valise to the Goodwin Holocaust Museum and Educational Center, which is a great place, and I'm very happy to do it. And as you know, I tell this story in my show, which grows in Brooklyn. But what's important here is that, my father, now you know the way I came here, right? The way I came to be here is because I did a book event here, and then I was interviewed for a television show in this museum. And something just spoke to me while I was here, and I knew about my dad's valise, and I had been thinking about donating it somewhere, probably the museum in Washington or somewhere in New York. And it just spoke out to me when I was here, and I mentioned it, and it worked out. And I'll tell you a little about this valise. This was the valise that my father used to come to the United States from a displaced persons camp in Germany. He came with both of my sisters, who were born in Europe, and my mom. My parents spent the war years in work camps in Siberia and Russia. There's a story attached to that, but I won't go into that right now. The rest of my family perished in the concentration camps. So my parents were lucky, as it would be. They came to this country and they lived in a homeless shelter on Lafayette Street in New York. And this homeless shelter was run by an organization called the Hayas, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which I'm sure many people know about. I will tell you a very short but very odd story about the valise and where my father went with it. So the building that my family lived in on Lafayette Street was the homeless shelter for the Hayas. 35 or 40 years later, well, maybe not that much, but 35 years later, I don't want to give my age away, I was asked to star in a show for Joseph Papp, who was a big impresario in New York, at the Public Theater. And I went to arrive at the theater, and on the side of the building I saw a bronze plaque that says this building was used to house homeless immigrants from the Nazi devastation in Eastern Europe. And I called my father. He said, yeah, that's the building we lived in on Lafayette Street. And to make matters almost entirely unbelievable, the name of the show that I was in, which was a Liz Suedo show, was called Jonah, which is my father's name. So this was like entirely weird. I write about it in my book. It's just totally crazy. But let me tell you the things that I learned from my father. Some very, very important things associated with my life here and associated with his experience in the Holocaust. I learned a lot about honesty and integrity, and especially justice from my father. And what I'm really excited about is the educational value that this could have here and what my dad taught me. My father believed in justice for everyone. What he learned from his experience was that a people can be put upon, and the world needs to react. I was watching TV with my dad during the years of the Vietnam War, and it was during the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia, and they were devastating the population in Cambodia. And my father turned to me, he said, you know what, I thought it was just the Jews. It's not. And it reminded me of that, there's a pastor, Martin Niemöller, who said, oh, you have it up there. Okay, first they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. And you know, that was so powerful. That's what my father thought and lived. He defended the rights of oppressed people everywhere, always. He marched for Soviet Jewry, but also defended everybody, including some people's rights that were not so popular to defend at certain times in the world. And I won't go deeply into that. I don't want to get into a political discussion. But my father was a righteous person. The other thing I learned from him, which I think is important in the context of this valise in a place like this, is these people like my dad and others who started their lives again had to have tremendous courage to try to live again. Imagine trying to ever laugh again, given what had happened. And I learned about that courage, but I also learned that, in a way, we all have that same journey. We all have challenges in our lives. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but they all seem big to us. I'm sure if you told me your life, you'll tell me about challenges your family had. The journey is, like my dad and so many other people, the journey is to focus mostly on those things for which you can be grateful and move forward in your life. You know, I think that these people who recreated their lives and had children and had people, you know, I'm a child and now I have a beautiful wife and son. People like my father could not do that if they didn't change their focus from what had happened to them. If you stay in the challenges and the difficulties of your life at all times, which to a degree my mother did, I'm sorry to say, you know, my mom never healed as much as my father did, although, you know, it affects everyone in a very serious way. But that challenge, we all have that in life. We all have that journey. And when I look at a valise, it reminds me that life is a journey. And a valise is what you travel with. And you know, I love this valise, and it's been in my family and in my house. But it doesn't teach anybody anything in my home. My son looks at it, you know. But here, it has an opportunity to be a physical manifestation of some of the ideas that are important to learn from the Holocaust and from lives like my father's.
Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit, I know your father's experience, I'm sure, was really lengthy, but just tell us briefly where your father was in Europe and how he ended up in Russia, how long he was there.
Sure. So my dad was in Poland, and my mother too.
Were they married at the time?
They were not married, and I will tell you, in a very interesting conversation I had with my dad when I was taking his testimony, I said, yeah, and then you and Mommy were married, and he kind of went like that. I said, what? He said, well, that's not exactly what happened. I said, what do you mean? And then I realized after that, I didn't press it, there's no photographs, there was never a story about when my parents got married. You know? Who knows? But the story I heard, and it is related to what really happened, this is what really happened. So my father, and this is written in a book from the survivors of the town my father lived in called Wrocław, which was the town. In the survivors book, they wrote a story. Some Jews, the Nazis were already there, and some Jews had gotten together for an unlawful Yom Kippur service. The Nazis found out about it, and they dragged the Jews into the street, and they shot a few of them, including a 16-year-old boy, and they left them in the street. The next day, my father and two other people from something was called the Youth Bund went and took these people and buried them in a Jewish cemetery. Now they were in trouble. I mean, now they were being searched for. So my father, who was dating my mother at the time, you know, he had to get out of town quick. He went to my mother's father, and he said, look, if you'll let her come with me, I promise I'll take care of her until we're able to return. The story I heard was that that's when they got married. He said, okay, as long as you get married. Well, when I said it to my father, he said, well, he sort of did that. And then I remembered from my mother saying that her father never came to the train station to see them off. So it's not clear what happened. But what is clear is that my parents went to a place called the Pas. This was a no man's land between German-occupied Poland and Russian-occupied Poland, where there was sort of no managerial, no one was in charge there. It was a no man's land. And the border would change every day, and they figured they would hang out there until the things calmed down and the Nazis left. No one knew what was going to happen here. They figured it's a bad time for Jews, it'll calm down, we'll go back. While they were there, Germany attacked Russia. So my parents ran with the Russian army and everything, and then they were captured, of course, in Russia, and they were sent to work camps deep in Russia, in Siberia. And there's long stories about that, how they got there. But that is where my sister Wanda was born, and the story was that she underwent a brain operation at 6 days old with no anesthetic. And they actually had her have this operation, and then my father tells the story. He said a Jewish doctor came to them and said, listen, your daughter will die, because they had her in some infirmary or something. He says, she can't survive this. You have to take her out of there and come to my home every day to change the bandages. That's her only chance of survival. So my parents, they worked with stones. They took stones out of the ground, mining, and one dug the stones and one carried them. And every day, one of them would sneak away with my daughter, with their daughter, with my sister Wanda. And they said you can only see her nose. This was in the Siberian cold. They wrapped her up, and they walked 10 miles to this man's house, back and forth. They would just disappear and do this for weeks, and my sister survived. So that's one of the stories of
one of many stories, I'm
one
sure.
of many stories.
And after the war was over, they both found that their parents and other siblings did not survive. Did they have anyone left up besides each other after the war?
No, but I will tell you that they both had very different ideas of how to continue. And this is also how I learned that different people in life deal with the circumstances of their life quite differently. My mother used to complain that my father would not even look in the newspaper to see. People were putting ads in the newspapers, we survived, where are you, who's there? She said he wouldn't even pay attention because he told me later when we started to talk about it. My father didn't talk about the history or the old country for years, until I was an adult. He never spoke of it. My mother, a lot. My father, never. And we knew not to ask about it, But when we did talk about it, he said, it's like a bad dream. It just seems like a bad dream. And he thought his job here in the United States was to get a job, work hard. He worked 15 years, 7 days a week, my dad. I barely saw him when I was growing up. And he did. He worked night and day and take care of, make a living to support his family and start again. That's what he did. So the inference from my mother was maybe some people did survive. But I don't know of any, and certainly we always lived with the idea that nobody did. Now, there were many stories about people we knew who had perished. One that I talk about on my show, which is very poignant to me, my mother would talk about her family to me, and she talked about her brother. And she would cry, Her brother was on a ship, I forget the name of it, people know the name of the ship, it just escapes me at this moment. But this ship, it was the end of the war, and it was bound for freedom in the United States already. And it was mistakenly bombed by Allied forces at the very end of the war. My mother never got over that. She was, my mom was